We are back, and we are here with another one of your questions about work. Today, which is day 148 for us, and for those of you who are new, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future work. And this is kind of one of these core questions that underlies so much of what people want to do at work. I often feel like, and I'm going to introduce our guest in a second, but I often feel like there's this phase often at the beginning of people's careers, but not always, it can last a long time, where folks just want to succeed at what they've been asked to do. Hey, I got hired for a job. Like, how do I do a good job and get my pat on the head or get the next thing? And then there's a moment, and in this class I teach at Berkeley, I've been calling it the hypothesis moment. We just talked about this yesterday, where somebody has a guess. They're like, I have a thing I want to do. I want to either have this role at a company, or I have a dream of something I want to build, a startup in the case of life experiences that our guest and I have shared. And Sunil Gupta is not only a friend and started a venture-backed company, worked at a fast-growing tech company, ran for political office, and is now the author of a book called Backable, where he has gone around and spoken to some of those people who you're like, why did they take a chance on that person? And so, Sunil, why don't I just ask, it's hard to reduce this whole book to a quick thing, but if you can just share one insight on how do I get someone to take a chance on me?
Yeah, Roy, good to be here. Thank you. We all know that creativity and persuasion are two different things. You can have a great idea.
Right. People have the ideas, the people who can make that others follow in their wake.
Yeah, exactly. You can have a brilliant product. You could be a great candidate. You could have a great vision and still be dismissed. And we see it happen all the time. And I wrote this book not because I had a solution, but because I had a problem and I was looking for a solution. And so what I was drawn to are these backable people who seem to have this it quality, where they get to walk into a room and we really want to rally around them. And the thing that makes it unique is that oftentimes that's before they're the obvious choice, or when the vision is half baked. But we sort of have this leap of faith that they're going to sort of get there, and we want them to get there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand, like, what is that really all about? And can it be learned? And so, I spent the past 5 years studying hundreds of backable people from all walks of life, from Oscar-winning filmmakers to celebrity chefs to military leaders to iconic founders. And what I found is that, if you rewind their story to the beginning, what you find is actually a very different version of who they are than who they are today. You often, in most cases, find somebody who was not born backable, but they learn that. And that means that any of us can as well. And you don't need to be a celebrity. You don't need to be a CEO. What we did in this book is we outlined the 7 qualities that surprised us the most with techniques on how to bring it to your life. And let's just talk about one. So, when I first started the book, one of the things I really thought I would find, I really believed, is that backable people would have a certain style of communication. Generally speaking, I thought they were all going to be gifted speakers.
Tone of voice or cadence or something like that.
Tone of voice, cadence, eye contact, pacing, hand gestures, all these things.
Right. There's that famous TED talk about like posture.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Dale Carnegie-esque, Toastmasters-esque.
Toastmasters. Oof.
Yeah, I know. And the reality is that there are certain backable people that do that.
Yeah.
But I would say that there are many who do not. And, one of my favorite examples is if you just go and search for the #1 most popular TED Talk of all time, what you might be surprised to find is a very un-TED-like presentation. It's a guy named Sir Ken Robinson who gives this phenomenal talk on education.
Just passed away, I think.
He passed away last fall. Just a sweet guy. And what's amazing about his talk is that, he's got a hand in his pocket. He had he was disabled, so he had a bit of a slouch, and he kind of meandered on and off script. Again, not the poster child for charisma, but a brilliant talk. And we see these examples over and over again, right? Even if you go back to the 2007 launch of the iPhone, I always remember that as like this highly charismatic presentation. And I went and watched it the other day on YouTube, and it's like, you
went through the example of like Barack Obama having been a terrible public speaker and kind of wooden and boring at one point. And so what is it about those?
Yeah.
What is a quality that people can focus on learning in order to then deliver that backability?
Yeah. So what I found is that it's not it's not charisma that makes a person convincing. It's conviction. Backable people take the time to convince themselves first, and then they let that conviction shine through whatever style it is that feels most natural to them. So how do we take that away and like put it into practice? Well, and I think we all sort of have these moments where we get hit with an idea, an inspiring idea, and we want to share it immediately. And we do, and we blurt it out, and the people around us have nowhere near the level of excitement that
happens to me almost every day. Ask my team.
Happens all the time. All the time. Now, Roy, you're like, my sense is that you can sort of handle that, right? And you can still kind of run with the idea. But for a lot of us, when that happens, we feel really deflated, and we take that idea and we put it in a drawer and we kind of walk away.
Yeah.
What we found is that if you look inside companies, just as an example of how ideas really bubble up, what we found is that a lot of great ideas don't get killed inside the conference room. They get killed inside hallways, around water coolers, and very casual conversations, because what happens is we sort of blurt out the idea before it's ready to be shared. And we don't get the reaction we want, and that ends up being sort of the moment that we decide to sort of walk away. Well, what backable people tend to do is they tend to take that one moment where they sort of almost do a little bit of decision tree, and they ask themselves, is this an idea that I have high conviction for? And if the answer to that is yes, then by all means, share it in that moment. Like, there's no time like the present. But if the answer to that is no, then what backable people tend to do is they take incubation time with their own idea. They resist the temptation to share it in that exact moment, and take the time to actually nurture and start to build confidence around their own idea before they share it. And it doesn't have to be bulletproof, but you almost think about it, the difference between a chocolate M&M and a peanut M&M, right? A chocolate M&M, you squeeze on it, cracks immediately. Peanut M&M, not, it's not steel, but you can squeeze it a little bit. And so what you're trying to do with this incubation time, you're trying to put a peanut inside. And we can talk about some of the ways we do that.
Well, I mean, look, I find what I hear in that is that there's a timing and dosage of getting it to the point where you're confident enough. Of course, in the startup tradecraft, we coach people all the time not to try to perfect dot every I and cross every T, because you got to get out there and see what customers are going to think and others. But I love that, doing the work to build conviction. But let me just ask you, just real talk.
Yeah.
One more little question is, here we are, two guys talking to each other. And I have had many cases where people who are deeply convinced of what it is that they are doing, they have conviction, run out into the market, and whether for factors they can identify, or it's sexism or racism or something else, they get treated very differently than somebody else who might be the exact same level of conviction. And I'm just curious what guidance you have for people who may be struggling with that, because they're sitting there thinking, I'm fucking convinced. Yeah. And yet, I'm either being judged for whatever reasons. And I just love any of the hard-earned wisdom on, like, okay, if I do that and then I get deflated, what do I do?
Yeah. Well, what is that? I mean, less than 2% of venture capital right now goes to female founders. Less than 0.0006% of venture capital goes to Black female founders. I mean, it's a huge problem. And, Roy, I wish I had sort of the systemic.
Sure. I'm just looking for what are your experiences.
Yeah, no, and I think one of the things that I learned is that, I spoke a lot to a coach named Maureen Taylor, who works with a lot of, women of color, works with a lot of introverted founders as well, who have high conviction in their ideas, but then they get into a room and they sort of feel like it's just uncomfortable. And part of the reason it's uncomfortable is because the people across the table just feel very differently than them, or maybe look very differently than them. And so one of the things that she coaches her founders and executives to do is she says, when you're going to walk into an interview or a pitch or a presentation, you're going to feel like the spotlight is on you. And your job in that situation is, as quickly as possible, to turn that spotlight to something else. Turn that spotlight to your customer. Turn that spotlight to your product. One of the easiest ways that we can do that is by putting up a visual of some sort, right? Showing the app, showing the product, because what that ends up doing is it very quickly turns us away from presentation mode, the way we are in right now, which can be very awkward, especially if there is that bias, and it turns us into huddle mode, or huddling around something together. One of my favorite stories from the book is there was a founder who I sat in on his pitch, and he was pitching this pizza app. He's a 4th generation retail pizza shop owner, and you push a button, you get a pizza delivered from a local independent pizza place, not a Little Caesars, not a Domino's. And I arrived at the meeting a few minutes early, and he's this really charming guy, right? I mean, he's not a tech guy, but like really charming guy, and a great idea. But then as investors started to come into the room, you could see sort of like him starting to tighten up a little bit. And he was kind of trying to be the version of the person I think he wanted the investors to believe he was, or who he thought he should be.
Instead of just being who he was.
Exactly. But I would say the first half of the presentation did not go well. But when he pulled out his phone and started showing the app, and as it turns out, he didn't have it in slide form, so we all kind of huddled around his shoulders. That energy, that creative juice started to come back, and he started to become who he was again. I think we are so much more compelling when we are showing something than when we're describing something. That's true for everybody. But sure. I think when we're in these situations of bias, it can be even more important.
I love the insight there to shift the attention to solving the problem. And because we all have the problems we want to see solved in the world. All right, Sunil, I definitely got a lot out of reading through. I'll hold it in frame. People can grab the book. And I'm just looking forward to many more excuses to seeing the things that you bring into the world that get backed, and all the people who continue to persevere when others are not, nobody gets backed by everybody they meet. And so, yeah, we will continue on. And actually, you know what? I see one more quick thing just while I have a second from Kevin Delaney on LinkedIn. Hi, Kevin, who writes a great newsletter that I think folks should subscribe to. So aren't the informal advisors the people who help you refine and develop confidence around an idea? Mentors, sponsors, and friends, people with whom you refine ideas without judgment. I just put them up right here so you can see the comment. And I'll give my quick take on that while Sunil has a chance to read, which is that there's no such thing as the binary of like, this is a person without judgment and this is a person with judgment. I see it, again, as a timing and dosage thing of there's a matter of degrees, and you bring in some of your closest people first, and you try to, pick the folks who you think are going to be honest with you and support. And then that's a big part of the trade craft, is the sequencing of knowing who to bring in when, as opposed to thinking you have some kitchen cabinet that's always there for you no matter what. I just think in reality, even if people describe it that way, it isn't that way. And I'm curious, Sunil, what you think.
Yeah. Great question, Kevin. One of the things that we talk about in the book, one of the habits that we noticed amongst backable people is that they tend to play a lot of what I call exhibition matches before they go to a main event. Okay. These are low stakes practice sessions before they get into these high stakes moments. And oftentimes when we see people who seem natural, they seem like just naturally gifted, like they came up with this stuff on the spot. Oftentimes it's the product of lots and lots of practice. And these practice sessions are actually pretty sloppy, right? But the theme of all of this is that long-term success can come from short-term embarrassment. And so you might as well embarrass yourself in front of friendlies through these exhibition matches. These can be friends, it can be family members. But what I noticed is that very specifically to your question, Kevin, backable people tend to surround themselves with a circle of people that they, like Roy said, will bring in at different times. And I've noticed that they all have the same personalities in those circles. And I call them the 4 C's. And I know we're running short on time, so I'll run through those 4 very, very quickly. So the first C is your collaborator. And when you're with this person, you almost feel like you're in a musical jam session together. They're building on top of your ideas. The second is your coach. And your coach is different from your collaborator, because while your collaborator is thinking about whether your idea fits the market or does it make sense logically, your coach is figuring out, does this actually make sense for you? Does it fit you? Is it who you are? That's your coach. Your third is your cheerleader. Self-explanatory. We all need somebody who, no matter what, you can call and get that last bit of juice before you walk into a big moment. A lot of people I interviewed for this book had massive Rolodexes, but when I asked them questions like, who do you call in the moments before that big meeting, it was like my mom, my husband, my wife. These are your cheerleaders. The fourth is my favorite, though, which is your critic, but I like to call this person your cheddar. Your cheddar. And the reason
in the holes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you've ever seen the movie 8 Mile, Eminem is surrounded by a circle of friends, in
The
the movie.
finale is one of the great scenes in movie making, not
The
just for
best.
you Detroiters.
The best. And I'm coming to you right outside of Detroit, and and he's surrounded by a circle of friends. One of his friends is Cheddar, who's always kind of poking holes in his ideas. And what we realize through the movie is that it's Cheddar that actually gets Eminem ready for the stage. And we all have a Cheddar in our lives. Someone who's going to be honest with us, has the best intentions for us, but is going to point out our blind spots. And those people can be annoying, and we tend to want to push them away. But as backable people, we need to pull those people in, embrace them, so we can be ready for those backable moments.
I love that. And I mean, that is a truly great scene. It reminds me of this saying that somebody told me is an Irish saying of take the eyes out of your own potatoes. And you talk about diffusing some of the objections in the book. And I'll just say this, which is another thing I've noticed about some of the most backable people is that they spend a lot of time cultivating those relationships with people to enlist them into that role, and boost up the capacity of people doing those 4 C's. And Kevin suggests we read The Wicked and the Vile on Churchill doing practice lines and speeches. All right, we're going to leave that for the next steps on this. Sunil, thank you. And for those of you who have been with us before, you heard me say this. The reason this isn't advice is because really all we're doing is relaying the experiences we've heard from others. We're not trying to live your life for you. You got to decide. And we'll be back another day and have a read of Backable, folks. Thank you, Sunil.
Thanks, Roy.
Great to meet you.
Okay.
If you're lucky to have Sunil in your 4 C's circle, you're a very fortunate